Hey guys, welcome to Spirit Pig. This is the show that explores how to live a fulfilled life. I'm Duncan CJ, and today I'm speaking with Dr. David Hamilton. David is an international speaker, teacher, and author of 8 books, including popular titles such as How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body, It's the Thought That Counts, and I Heart Me. And he has a first-class honours degree in chemistry, specialised in biological and medicinal chemistry, and a PhD in organic chemistry. I didn't even know what half those things were, so I'm like, this guy's clever, okay? This is all we need to know. And he used to work for a big pharmaceutical company, and his job was to build drugs, which combat heart disease and cancer. And by build drugs, he literally meant build drugs. He would be the one sticking atoms together. And during this time, he became absolutely fascinated in the power of placebos, so much so that he left the industry and started researching just how our mind shapes our bodies, our health, and even our realities. So David, huge honor talking to you today. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Duncan. It's great to be here.
Now, this is I've had this issue on a couple of occasions with interviews. I mean, I was looking through your books and some of the things you talked about, and I was like, I want to talk about everything. I want to talk about like the old stuff, the new stuff. And I was like, how can there be any sort of structure? So I'm going to apologize in advance. If I'm suddenly like talking about something and then I just ask you something completely random, unrelated, you know, I normally try and find a nice little segue from questions, but screw it. I think the segue is going to be gone on this interview, if that's okay.
Well, that's kind of how my mind works anyway. I'm kind of on one train of thought, then something else pops in and I'm gone. So that works for me.
Now, I mentioned it in the intro about the placebos, and this was something which really fascinated you because you were studying these, drugs for cardiovascular, cancer, and, say a regular drug might get, say, 75% of the people improving after taking that drug, that's, doing well. You realize actually the power of the placebo made up of what? Sugar and often just like blackboard chalk could get anything from like 67, 70, 73, 74% people placebo on just this sugar tablet.
I know, and it's amazing because years ago people used to quote this statistic, the placebo effect was 35%, and that's not complete, is it nonsense? It was an old statistic. It really varies it depends on the nature of the medical trial. It depends on the drug. It depends on the person talking to you about the drug, the context. It can vary a little from 10% to 99%. It's so broad. And so I became fascinated when I worked in the industry. In fact, my main field was cardiovascular. And I found one of the things that really fascinated me at the time was one of the biggest blockbusters of the time. Now, a blockbuster in the drugs industry is a drug that sells over $1 billion a year. So annual sales topping $1 billion. So Viagra, for example, is a blockbuster. The sales top $1 billion a year. Back then, one of the blockbusters was a cholesterol-lowering drug, something that I knew quite a lot about. And the 5-year survival rate for the drug for patients who'd had heart attacks or something was 80%. But the placebo was 79.1. Amazing. Yeah. And it's those kind of things that used to really fascinate me. But this is where a lot of people misunderstand the placebo. We then assume that if the drug's 80, the placebo is 79.1, that the drug doesn't work. That's not true at all, because people like me used to build them, as you pointed out in the intro, atom by atom. What it actually means is that your mind is so powerful that you can create your own chemistry that does the job that you're expecting the drug to do. So if you're expecting the drug to lower pain, then your brain will create chemistry that lowers pain. If you're expecting the drug to make you to gradually have an effect on your nervous system, then you will create chemistry you would create chemistry in your brain that causes that relaxing effect. So what happens is what you expect to happen, you create chemistry to deliver that expectation. And that's what I think is amazing about this.
That's great. It's crazy. And then I guess this can work positively and negatively, I'm assuming. So like whether you think something will work or you think something won't work, like it will affect the chemistry, and you will have, so the drug is that baseline, but the amount it could work in your favor or against you is based on that intention, that thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people do suppress the power, of mainstream medicine or even alternative medicine by really not believing in it. And so your belief as well, if that's the baseline, of whatever drug or therapy or thing you're using, then you can make it, as you pointed out, that good, or you can suppress its power just because of your expectation.
And there's also hearing about the difference, because I mean, I think I might have heard something about this years ago, but I didn't actually. Paracetamol versus Panadol, like,
Yeah.
It was like, just for anyone who doesn't know about this thing, we're talking about the exact same thing. What is the difference? Could you explain that?
Well, what happens is that there was a study done a number of years ago, and it was on aspirin, and you can map the figures onto things like paracetamol, ibuprofen, and stuff. But basically, what you find is if something is more expensive, like paracetamol and Panadol are the exact same thing, right? But you can buy paracetamol in supermarket, and certainly in the UK, for like 15p, and Panadol's 10 times the price. But because it's 10 times the price, we have a little story in the head that says, if something's more expensive, then it must be better. And we've heard it so many times, and we've actually had the direct experience of it. We've actually experienced that paying more for an item of clothing and it lasts longer. So because we've really taken that on board in a deep level in our minds, when you buy a more expensive version of the same drug, so you give it a different name and make the packaging all fancy, multiply the price by 10 times, then it does actually work better because it's 10 times the price. But again, it's because of your mind, because you've taken an idea into your head that says if something's more expensive, then it must be better. And it's your own mind that's making that, say, 10, 20, 30, 25 or so percent better. It's your own mind that's doing it. Amazing, eh?
I love it. It's so funny. And this is what I find, I know in particular in the last sort of like 5-10 years, I'm just hearing more and more of these research and these studies which just turn things on their head. The things which we think were being completely logical, we think this is like us making our choice, but actually, 25% increase and we're talking about the same thing. It's mad.
Yeah.
Now, there's a very, very clever study, I know, a few years ago, which looked at the link between stress and heart disease. But this study was different because they added a question to it.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Yeah, well, what happened was, normally if you can do a study, and this is a kind of thing that's been done many, many times, is you can draw a comparison between people's levels of stress, let's say over a long period of time. So let's say over 10 years, people would monitor their levels. You could say, how stressed do you tend to be? And what you can do, you can track over that period, that decade-long period. And what you normally find is those who are most stressed tend to have the shortest lifespan, right? And it's not something you see in day-to-day life as much as that, but over a population, statistically, what you tend to see is increases in stress tends to translate to more heart disease, therefore a shorter lifespan. But this particular study, they weren't just looking at asking people what's your typical level of stress, say, over the last period of time, but they asked them another question: do you believe that stress is bad for you? And it turned out that the belief itself made the world of difference, because you had those people who were really stressed, and at the other end you had those people that were hardly stressed at all. But in those who were really stressed, those who were really stressed, but who didn't believe that stress was bad for them, in fact, who actually had the belief that stress is good for them, the death rate was actually lower than in those who were hardly stressed at all, but who believed that stress was bad for them. So even if you've hardly any stress but believe it's bad for you, that's actually worse for you than having a lot of stress but believing that it's good for you. And when the scientists actually extracted the statistics, it turned out that the belief in stress itself was the 15th leading cause of death in the United States. A belief. not stress, but a belief in stress actually made it onto the top 20 of leading causes of death. A belief, a psychological thing. Isn't that fascinating, eh?
It's crazy. I love it. Do you love this line of work, this investigation, this finding stuff? Like, what would you say has been the sort of biggest, paradigm shift, like in the last sort of 10, 15 years for you? I mean, has there been an occasion where you completely blown your mind?
Several times. See, whenever I find like a study like that, or a study like, things like paracetamol, or that blockbuster study with the cholesterol lowering, whenever I hear something that I can't wait to share with people, that for me is paradigm shifting. Even though it's something that I know, and my knowledge and understanding of the mind-body connection has just gradually increased. over, I left the pharmaceutical industry in October 1999, and there's been a gradual increase in my breadth of knowledge, I suppose. But the paradigm shifts come every time I find a study that I cannot wait to tell you how amazing that is. And then it gets into the realization of the implications get into my head, and you start to realize how much this means for people in their lives. If we could just learn how to tap into, how to harness this kind of stuff, because we're harnessing it all the time, but most of us are doing it in the negative.
Yeah.
And if we can understand the principles, what's going on, then we can kind of turn it around a wee bit.
Yeah, I like how you said when you hear a study or hear information that you're just like, I can't wait to share. Like this morning at breakfast, I had I had a lot of this research and a lot of this information learning about your work fresh in my head. And actually over breakfast, I was sharing this around the kitchen table with some of these studies, just being like, can you believe this? So,
that's great.
Now, bit of a random segue. Number one, kindness. A major side effect of kindness is happiness. This has actually been now scientifically proven, isn't it? That kindness makes us happier.
Yeah. And it does it for a number of reasons. I mean, I think when you do something kind, when you're kind, there's something emotional and spiritual that kind of feels good. But actually, neurologically, one of the things that's going on in the brain is that the belief that we're producing the brain's natural versions of morphine and heroin. So just like getting a high on drugs, you get a high out of connecting, out of being kind. And that kind of explains what some scientists call helper's high. But it actually is a pharmacological high, in the brain. But that's a side effect. But in the long term, numerous studies done in numerous different ways have all confirmed the same thing that you said, Duncan, that kindness itself does actually make us happier. But the key is it does it in the long term. If we're consistent with it, then actually happiness gradually increases in the long term. Yeah, we get an instant hit from doing something kind, because you feel good, you feel warm and connected to the person, and there's a nice little feeling in the chest area. But if you do this consistently, not to gain from it, but because it's the right thing to do, then what happens is your actual baseline happiness starts to increase, your deep sense of satisfaction and all that in life. That is what gradually increases. It's a consistency that's really important with the kindness stuff.
And it's contagious, isn't it? Like this is
absolutely,
the whole pay it forward kind of thing. But it kindness leads to more kindness. And if you've done a kind thing to me, then I'm much more inclined to then go out and then do a kind thing to somebody else. And so absolutely, even on the micro scale, if you're just concentrating on just being kind, you are, I know it sounds head in the clouds, but you are literally changing a much bigger playing field.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question that we are that life itself is deeply interconnected. There is no isolated acts. There are no isolated acts. So every act of kindness on the deepest, more philosophical levels is having an effect. Is changing the world, if you like. But on even the really primary level, even scientists at Harvard have measured this. How one act actually inspires another, and they've actually measured it goes out to 3 degrees of separation. Now, basically what that means is when you randomly help someone, the chances are they will help someone else 1 degree, who will help someone else 2 degrees, who will help someone else is 3 degrees of separation. 3 social steps. Really cool, eh? So if each person had 4 contacts, then you would find one act of kindness would affect 4 people, times 4 is 64 people. And we don't realise the impact that the ordinary person has several times a day when you do something nice.
I love that. So the guys over at Harvard are obviously pretty clever, because I was reading about the Harvard study, the piano study. They're doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, I know one of my favourite pieces of research, actually. This is one of these paradigm shifts that you can't wait to tell people. And they had people playing 5 notes on a piano, plunk, 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 well, just up and down the scale, on and off, for a couple of hours. And they do it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And they find that the area of the brain connected to the finger muscles literally grows like a muscle. And by the Friday, it's literally 30 to 40 times bigger than it was on the Monday. But a separate group of people, instead of playing the notes with their fingers, They do it in their mind. They just imagine the movement of their fingers and imagine the sound. They have their brain scanned every day as well. And it turns out that their brain in the same region connected to the finger muscles also increases in size by 30 to 40 times. And if you lay the brain scans side by side, you really can't tell the difference between who played the notes and who imagined playing the notes.
So literally the muscles were actually, you're building your muscles even though there's absolutely no physical contact on them.
Yeah, in fact, do you want to see the brain scans?
Yeah, absolutely.
I happen to have them on my iPhone.
You carry them around at all times. Where's David? He's got his brain scans.
Because some people ask me, and so I tend to have them in my favourites. There we are. There. I don't know if you can see that. So on the top row, that fingerprint that's increasing in size.
Yeah.
That's the area of the brain connected to the finger muscles. So as each person is playing the notes 2 hours a day, that fingerprint region is increasing in size. That's the top 2 rows. The middle 2 rows are those who did it in their minds.
There's literally no difference, pretty much.
No difference. Versus a control group at the bottom who did neither.
Okay, gotcha. So the bottom's the control where it's just to prove that. Gotcha.
Yeah. So in other words, the brain is not making a distinction between those who play the notes, the top 2 rows, and those who imagine playing notes. Because that fingerprint increasing size, what you're seeing there is a phenomena called neuroplasticity, where the region of the brain is actually increasing in size like a muscle, just like if you exercised a muscle and it would grow. So what it's saying here is you can do something with your fingers, with your muscles, or you can imagine doing the same thing. To your brain, it's exactly the same thing. And it's exerting a physical effect on your brain.
So what are some of the practical implications of this? I mean, we touched on some of them earlier, but like knowing this information, how does that change how we go about? I don't know. I don't really know what this question is. I'm just thinking of it in the spot. But so knowing it, I mean, is this, so for example, positive thoughts versus negative thoughts? Is this all tied in? You know, if we're imagining something bad happening, I mean, is that all like what are the implications of this? Do you think?
There's numerous implications because it turns out that imagining moving your fingers actually makes them stronger. And numerous scientific studies have done that, and they've measured an actual improvement in strength by just imagining moving your muscles. So you can see the implications, obviously, for one, people who've had a stroke, even Parkinson's disease, even spinal cord injuries, and also sports people. In fact, last year I did a talk at a small corporate event, and I was right after Sally Gunnell. I was the next speaker. Sally Gunnell, the Olympic gold medalist in 1992 Barcelona in the 400-meter hurdles. And Sally Gunnell gave her talk, and it was almost all about the mind-body connection. And she said that 70% of her victory in the Olympic Games was mental. It was daily visualization of her muscles doing exactly what she wanted them to do. And she was the first professional athlete in the UK to start doing visualization. Now they all do it. It's sort of part of the routine. And it was amazing because I was the very next speaker. And I wasn't even planning on talking about that, but I spent the first 10 minutes just scientifically validating what Sally Gunnell had just said at her thing. So there's an obvious implication. What you're seeing now is it's not just changing the brain. What you're seeing now is a physical effect on your body. So that's because the brain and the body are connected. So what about extending that even further? What about someone who's ill and who imagines the state of illness being converted into a state of wellness? Scientists are actually probing that. There's several scientific studies now that have looked not just at stroke and Parkinson's disease and spinal cord injury, muscular kind of things that involve muscular movement, but actually things like infections and things like, deeper things inside the body, and finding the same result. Even things like dieting, like weight loss, tricking the brain into thinking that you've eaten. By imagining eating, actually, to some degree, the brain thinks you are eating, and what happens is it turns down your appetite, so you end up eating less. So there's lots of studies like this, and I've certainly collected several hundred over the years of people who've actually used visualization like this, if you call it visualization, to help their recovery from even serious diseases. And the standard process they use, if you call it a process, is they take a picture of illness and they turn it into a picture of wellness. So even people getting cancer, they imagine the tumours shrinking smaller and smaller and smaller, and disappearing, smaller and smaller and smaller and disappearing. And before I go any further than that, I just say that they're not doing this instead of taking medical advice, because if you're sick, the most important thing is to take the best medical advice. But whatever advice they've got, whatever else they're doing, they're using their mind as well. So not necessarily, not instead of medical advice, but in addition to medical advice. But that is a common factor right across the board of all the people using visualization. They have a picture in their mind of illness, and they turn it into a picture of wellness. And just like the piano study was plump, 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 repetitively, they do the same visualization every day, over and over and over again.
And with that picture, you said they have a picture of illness in their mind and they have a picture of it getting well. There isn't this isn't like a universal idea of what it is. So for example, I think I heard you saying how one person might have the idea of the cancer, and then they've got this visualization of little piranhas coming along and nibbling at it. Somebody else might have it almost as like a big iceberg, and then it's the sun melting it away. Another person might have it as lightning bolts, which is radiotherapy. So it's whatever visualization techniques which resonates, which works with them. That's going to be more powerful than just saying this is the way to do it.
Absolutely, that's totally right, Duncan. And it's good because that's really good, because everyone thinks in their own way, and not everyone visualizes in their own way. However you visualize, whether you see in high definition or just get a vague kind of intentional sense of something, you're doing it right. And it doesn't matter what it looks like to you, as long as your end product is wellness, you're doing it right.
Amazing. And last, I'm gonna get you to explain one more study just before we go, because it's another great one. Like, you take two people who share an emotional bond with each other, be it husband and wife, mother and daughter, for example, and there's this crazy test called correlations. What's that? Yeah. Well, because this tied on when you were saying earlier about how just interconnected the world is, and it's like just when we think things aren't interconnected, like it's quite hard to work out this one otherwise. Yeah.
Well, science it's funny because science is actually moving closer towards agreeing with, the Tibetan Buddhist philosophy of emptiness that basically says that everything is interconnected deeply at the most fundamentally profound levels. Everything is connected, and therefore there is no separation between anything. And one of the great experiments in science that kind of, not just quantum physics, but mainstream science that back up that kind of idea, had people who shared an emotional bond. Let's say it could be husband and wife, mother and daughter, even same-sex partners. It doesn't matter, as long as the people have an emotional bond. And one goes in an MRI scanner and the other's down the corridor. So let's say, for argument's sake, it was a mother and daughter, right? So the mother is in the MRI scanner, the daughter's down the corridor. She doesn't know that she's involved in the experiment, so she's just sitting in the waiting room. And all of a sudden the scientists just, it's called a startle response, so just like a little make you jump kind of thing. And at that moment of startling, the daughter gets startled, the mother's brain picks up a flash in the visual cortex, which is the bit that processes visual information. And it's called a correlation, because what's happened is that the daughter has got startled, saw something, got startled, but the mother's brain registered it in real time.
And there's no way. I mean, like you said, they're different rooms. She didn't hear it. She didn't see it. There's not that. So there's no relation in terms of they're in separate rooms, which is crazy.
No, and these experiments are written up generally in science as correlations, as you pointed out, between the neural states of people separated by a distance. And it's like almost like a scaled up version of what people call quantum entanglement, when you can take two paired particles, and separate them by like the width of the universe. And if you ping one of them, the other one instantly feels it, so to speak. And it's the same type of phenomena, but we're seeing it on a large scale rather than just a quantum scale. And that resonates very well with the Tibetan Buddhist ideas of emptiness, where they say at the deepest, most fundamentally profound levels, everything is interdependent and everything depends on everything else. And so nothing is isolated, nothing is separate at all, fact kind of thing.
Man, I'm going to throw the same kind of question as earlier. Like, when you hear that study, what else does it make you think? What other implications? Like, you see that, but as an isolated incident. But if that's connected, like, is that, whatever, like how we treat each other, how we treat the universe, how we treat like nature? I mean, what kind of implications does that make you think when you hear a study like that?
That everything matters. That everything matters. Our collective thoughts, our collective intentions, not just our collective actions, but even the small things, seemingly insignificant things. There are no isolated events. That's what I would say, is there are no isolated events. Something that we feel is so insignificant, an exchange with someone down the street, you think is such an insignificant thing. There are no insignificant isolated events. Everything depends on everything else, and everything affects everything else. And therefore, if we want to see, let's say, more fulfillment and happiness and peace in the world, we've got to be the source of that. We've got to start finding a way, not just being fulfilled and peaceful and happy ourselves, but helping other people to have that kind of state. And then what you see, because there are no isolated events, there are no individuals in that sense, then as we create that sense within ourselves and in our local environment, that is having a profound effect on the whole thing, on everything.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
What does a fulfilled life mean to you?
I would say doing things that are meaningful to me, that give meaning from my life, but also balancing that up with having some fun, with play and random things. I find, like we need biodiversity, for survival of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I feel I need diversity as well. I need, my writing, my work, and my speaking, but I also need other things like play and relaxation time and reading novels. And I find diversity works for me as long as a big part of that diversity, a big part of that is doing something that's really meaningful.
And what is one thing all our listeners can do today that will have a massive positive effect on their lives?
Just be kind on purpose, because it changes the world.
Right answer. Last but not least, how can people stay in touch, find out more about you and your work?
Well, my website is drdavidhamilton.com. I'm on Facebook as well, which is David R. Hamilton PhD is my Facebook handle. Is that, you call it a handle? But you can access it through my website anyway.
I'm pretty crap on social media. I need to sort it out. Handle. Yeah, it is. I think it's Twitter's handle, definitely.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
David, this has been so fun. I'm sorry for just firing random studies at you non-stop, but I just boom, I've got one chance. I'm gonna let's talk about some of these things. But no, it's been amazing. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too, Duncan. Me too.